AI is everywhere these days, right? I use it every single day. Do you know it wasn't even a college major a couple years ago? And now, as of the time of this recording, there are 12 universities who actually offer an undergraduate degree in artificial intelligence. I invited Dr. Jennifer Stephan back to our podcast. She's been on before. She's an independent educational consultant with Lantern College Counseling. She also wears another hat, and she is not representing Tufts University here today, but she does work at Tufts in the engineering department. And she has a lot of knowledge and passion around any STEM careers. We're going to talk about which are the 12 schools that have an AI major. What do you have to study to be the people behind the scenes that are building these amazing tools that we're all using? She also identifies for us three separate, we'll call them sub-career clusters within AI. There's a little bit of something for everybody in here. One of these majors is even housed in the philosophy department. That kind of surprised me. We talked about what teens can do to verify fit with real world experiences, something that we always focus on when we're launching career clarity, and how to engineer this beginning with the end in mind. So let's welcome Jennifer back to the show and dive in on this brand new college major, artificial intelligence. Jennifer, welcome back to the show. I think this is your third time.
It is. It is. Thank you for having me back, Lisa.
It's so exciting. And I love this topic because I mean, things are rapidly changing. We
Yeah.
use AI to help us, with our show notes. We use
Mhm.
AI to help us with editing. I mean, we cannot get away from it. And I don't know that we should be getting away from it. But what we're going to double down today is not just on that everyday use of AI, but really like it's emerging as a college major. I mean, this just shows how there are emerging fields for careers. There are changes that we have to adapt to.
Mhm.
And so I'm excited to talk about AI as an undergraduate major and all the things that go into this. So, first of all, from like an academic standpoint and a career standpoint, for the listener that's like, yes, yes, I've heard of ChatGPT, whatever. How would you define AI?
From an academic standpoint, in other words, AI as a field of study, it uses technology to create machines that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, uses math and logic to simulate human reasoning and decision making, learns by identifying patterns and relationships in large amounts of data, and uses algorithms to guide analysis and decision making. And what I mean by algorithms are, if you will, numerical recipes, a series of steps that operate on numbers, because ultimately everything in the computer is stored as a number. So if you think about it, technology, math, logic, large amounts of data, and algorithms, that is the core of the field of study of AI.
Love it. So my brain started going into like mapping like who this is a fit for, right? It's
Mhm.
not like suddenly there's new people that or there's something very very new that isn't at all related to what we had before. You know,
No.
ChatGPT, other pieces of AI. I've used Loom for years in my
Mhm.
business
Mhm.
that uses AI. It's existed, and there were people who had other majors long ago that came up with artificial intelligence models and tools and things like that. So, what is it rooted in or similar to, I
Mhm.
guess? Right?
Yeah.
I'm always looking for these like through lines when I'm talking about careers.
It's absolutely deeply connected to computer science, data science, other related fields such as electrical engineering, computer engineering. And we just, even 25, 30 years ago, people were doing the seeds of AI, but we just didn't have the hardware and, the other context, if you will, to harness it, to help it grow and evolve in the way it has today. But, those of us who were in grad school back in the 90s, my husband is an example. He's like, I was working on some of this stuff back then, but we just didn't have all of the pieces to stitch together to have it grow in the way that it did. So deeply related to many existing fields.
Well, then we stitched them all together and we got these tools that were more for the average user
Hmm.
who isn't, I would never call myself a STEM person or a techie
Hmm.
person, but now it's common. It's household. It's like
Hmm.
household, right? You know what I love with what you just described? I get pushback sometimes from usually from adults more than from kids about, well, how can I make a decision on a career path or a college major? Because things are so rapidly evolving right now that the job that I might want or have later doesn't even exist right now.
Hmm.
So, how in the world could I make a decision for today? And I say, well, if you have the self awareness and the career awareness, you'll make that step that's an informed decision and then it evolves into something else. And I love that your husband,
Hmm.
who, like you said, we were in college in the 80s and we're in grad school in the 90s. He's like, well, what the heck? I was doing this stuff all the way back in the
Yeah.
90s. It's just evolved in a different way. And that's the perfect answer to when I get that objection for I can't make a decision because it doesn't exist yet.
No, I agree entirely. And you're actually touching on a related question, which is
Yeah.
not what this podcast segment is about, which is like what skills are AI proof? That's a question that's top of mind for many students. And I always answer that, or many families as well. I always answer that question along the lines that you just did, which is I talk about being in grad school at Carnegie Mellon and I got my PhD in electrical and computer engineering
Yeah.
and I was there from 90 to 95. And we both know, as do many other people, that there is no more cutting edge technological place than Carnegie Mellon, right?
Right.
Arguably in the world. And when I was in grad school and at this cutting edge place, the web was just being born. I remember seeing my first web page. I remember a lab office or research teammate sharing his page with me and it had his picture and a few little things on it. And I was like, wow. And who could have envisioned at that time where we are right now? And I
Right.
didn't learn all the skills that I now have and know in terms of detailed specific skills. The skills I learned, which endured, were things like how to think like an engineer, how to problem solve like an engineer, how to be creative, how to take complexity and abstract over it so that I could get my mind around it and yet then break it up into smaller sub problems that were more
Mhm.
manageable, abstract over those details, etc., until I got to a level that I could solve the problem, and then I would weave them all back together. It's called divide, conquer, and glue, if you will. That's a problem-solving approach. Those skills were future-proof,
Yeah.
right? So I say to people, don't think about AI proof skills, think about future proof skills because whatever the field, whatever the time, whatever the place, learning those skills that transcend a specific discipline are what will take you forward.
Well, I think like it drives home this idea, and I say this all the time. Yes, I have a course, Launch Career Clarity, where we do career advising and coaching, like in the moment, right? But the attitude, we actually just recently revised the course, and I added on the front end just a very short lesson about mindset, right?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
what you just said drives at mindset.
Hmm.
And instead of, having an abundance mindset or this will be figure outable, being adaptable,
Hmm.
things like that.
Hmm.
And so as we think about that mindset piece, yes, career advising and coaching, we're doing something at this period of time, but career development should be
Hmm.
lifelong,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? We have to have an attitude, a mindset of this is a lifelong process and changes are going to come in society and careers and all the things, but we've got to be adaptable.
I always tell my students, particularly when they're in college, my college students, think about your time at college and building towards your career as a practice, much
Yeah.
like health or exercise or, any
Yeah.
other long-term goal. You don't just wake up at the end of, 4 years in college and suddenly start looking for a job. That's not
Right.
the way it works. It's a practice over time of building your network and learning, we won't go on about that.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
different podcast. But it's a practice.
So, okay, so then here's the next question. If we were already doing the work and had the majors and the training that led to being able to develop AI before AI as an undergraduate major or a graduate school major ever existed, why do we now have a major in artificial intelligence?
Well, the technology has advanced to such a degree that it has it has become pervasive in our lives as you led with and led to new industries, new jobs, new opportunities in a way that just never existed. We didn't have any vocabulary or any context for all of this.
Right.
Whoever knew what a prompt engineer was, as an example, we didn't have a way to process large amounts of data to enable what we now see. We just didn't have that capability, and now we do. And so it's been able to explode and open up all these avenues of applications and new fields, new careers, and new fields of study.
So there are a handful of colleges, not a ton right now. I mean, there's thousands of universities and colleges in the United States, over 3,000.
Hmm.
And there's a handful that actually have this degree.
Hmm.
So, who are the schools that have doubled down? Obviously, there are probably schools, I imagine, that I read on your blog, and we'll link this blog post to the show notes that we have. But you had a list, and they
Hmm.
all are notable universities that have a good STEM focus. And so, who are the schools, and how do we look for? Because I know this is just going to grow, right? I
Yeah.
mean, don't you expect that more schools
Oh,
are going to have an AI major?
absolutely, absolutely. And interestingly, there also may be other types of degrees that are not specifically an AI major, but that are, for instance, a liberal arts engineering degree that relates to, some of what I just said about really wanting the importance of having skills that transcend or endure, right? Transcend a
Yeah,
discipline or endure. But that's sort of an aside. Yes, there are, to my knowledge, as of this moment, a dozen schools that offer a formal degree in AI. I spoke in Detroit 3 weeks ago on this topic at a session at the IECA National Conference. I said that there were 11, and someone in the audience raised their hand and said, "We just started one at Bentley University." I didn't even know. So that's the type of field this is. That's how this field is rapidly evolving. So I'm aware of 12. Maybe there's a 13th that has since been born or, come to fruition. Bentley University.
and nobody hold you to that number, right? Like
That's right.
we don't need hate mail saying, "Well, no, Jennifer didn't count right," because there could be another one tomorrow, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I will share the 12 that I am aware of, and then I'll
Yeah,
also share two that are will be launched soon. So the 12 that I'm aware of are Bentley University. It has a business focus. It's actually an AI for Innovation BS degree. Combines AI and business. Carnegie Mellon University, my alma mater, where I got my master's and PhD. No surprise, is a
right.
traditional research-driven AI degree. And I'm doing these in alphabetical order so that
Yeah.
there's no, and then
No
Dakota State.
preference, no ranking here.
Right.
We're not
That's
getting
right.
all caught up in ranking.
Exactly. I'll say something about ranking in a minute if you like.
Okay. Yeah.
Dakota State University has an applied program, an AI, they have a BA, an AI BS degree. Drake University has a highly interdisciplinary program. They have an AI BA and a BS degree in the College of Arts and Sciences. So that's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Ferris State has an AI BS degree in its College of Business. So you can see, and I can say in a minute if you like, once we run through the 12, you can kind of cluster them a little bit and think
Yeah.
about different types.
Yeah. Let's do that.
We'll get there. Illinois Institute of Technology has an AI BS degree. It's a technical program with strong foundations in CS. Indiana University Bloomington has an AI BA degree. And it's a very career focused, human centered BA degree. Kaiser University, Fort Lauderdale has an AI BS degree. Kaiser, I just mentioned that. LIU, Long Island University, AI BS degree. No surprise to see MIT on the list. They have
Right.
what shouldn't surprise you, a very traditional in the sense of technical AI
Yep.
degree. A word about Purdue University is super interesting because Purdue University offers two distinct AI paths. They have a traditional BS degree, traditional technical BS degree from the College of Science, but they also have a BA degree in the philosophy department. And
Oh,
it's
in the philosophy department.
Yes, it's fascinating. It has, let me see if I have a note here. The major includes 8 specialized philosophy courses and 5 computer science courses. So it kind of mimics a philosophy major and a CS minor, if you will.
Yeah.
So students are grounded with some deep foundational core CS skills, but really,
Deep
looking-
thinking.
exactly, exactly.
Very like intellectually curious, deep thinking.
Yeah, looking at the context.
I mean, what I love about hearing all of not only are you giving us the list of schools,
Mhm.
but, and I'll let you finish the list, but as you're saying this, I'm like, it shows you like whether it's a BS or a BA, what house or division or
Mhm.
college it's housed in really makes a difference in the flavor of what you get and actually what is going to fit you as an individual. I mean, we always start with deep self-awareness when
Mhm.
we're doing our career advising, and these different branches or clusters, if you will,
Yep.
there's a wide variety. I mean, there's kind of something for everybody, is what I'm hearing.
Right, right. Let me share the 12th
Yeah.
school, which is UPenn, the first and the only Ivy League, and it is a BS in AI. So that's the 12th, but let me pick up on what you just said, and we can actually think about these 12 programs in three clusters, if you will, like those that are technical,
Mhm.
Carnegie Mellon, MIT, the BS from Purdue, UPenn, Illinois Institute of Technologies degrees. These are really the leaders in technical rigor,
Right.
then interdisciplinary. Drake, the BA degree at Purdue, Indiana, they emphasize ethics, interdisciplinary learning, and human-centered design. And then the third way we can kind of cluster them is business and industry oriented.
Hmm.
So Ferris State, Kaiser, Long Island University, excuse me, and Bentley and Dakota State. These are focused on applied skills and workforce readiness, if you
Yeah.
will. And the one thing I do want to say, if I may, is that you mentioned rankings before. Of the 10, if we want to talk about US News and World Report rankings, which I know we may, there's a lot to say about that. But if we do just look at that for a moment and look at the top 10 undergraduate AI programs, only two of those schools I just mentioned, sorry, only two of the top 10 are on that list of schools I just mentioned.
Yeah.
So, of the top 10 undergraduate programs, eight do not offer a formal AI degree. The two that do are CMU and MIT. But places like Stanford, UC Berkeley, Georgia Tech, they don't offer a formal AI degree. So that's just something worth noting,
Yet,
right?
yet at the time of this
Yeah,
recording.
exactly. Exactly.
Now, I have a question because some of those schools that you just mentioned are, I mean, MIT, Penn. I mean, there are some usual suspects of the Ivy Plus on that list that are very hard to get into. But is AI as a major competitive right now, or because it's new? Is it, I mean, computer science has been very competitive for years, to
Mhm,
the point where, Georgia Tech, it's now a direct admit major. They don't
mhm.
necessarily call it that, but I had Rick Clark on the podcast back in April, and he's like, yeah, it really basically is a direct admit major now. It has been for a long time at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So computer science is uber competitive.
Mhm,
If you don't get in as a first time freshman, many schools, Maryland, very hard to switch
mhm.
into later. And we try to educate families on that when they're making the right college list. Are these majors AI competitive, or because they're new, are they like a little bit less competitive?
I'm not 100% certain, to be honest with
Yeah,
you. My sense, my guess is that they are a little bit less competitive. I still think
that would be
CS
my
is,
gut,
yes, yeah.
right? And I could also see that shift rather rapidly. We have a free resource that gives you even like, I call it swipe copy. So you can just copy my email copy and then customize it and send it to a college, where we ask questions like, are there limitations on switching majors?
Hmm.
How easy or hard is it to change majors?
I
And
love that, Lisa. I love it.
it's so important, right? Are there restricted majors like computer science at Georgia Tech would be an example?
Mhm.
It's really easy to find like overall admission rates to a university or a college. It's harder to find them by major, but if
Yep.
you ask, admissions wants you to ask, they want to talk to you,
Hmm.
people. So
Yep.
send them the emails or pick up the phone and call them. And we give you the verbiage to do that. You just go to flourishcoachingco.com/majors. I'll put it in the show notes. But let's arm ourselves as wise consumers. But my gut is as yours are, and we have no data to show this.
No,
I bet it's a little bit less competitive than computer science, and it could rapidly change.
I agree. I agree. And I love that you do that. It's something I do with my students too in my college counseling practice. One of the ways in which I teach them to research a
Yeah.
school is to find somebody on the campus. Well, it could be an admissions officer, but it could be, a dean or an academic advisor or a program coordinator
Yeah.
for their program of interest that they can call and speak with or email and speak with. And sometimes you can just go on and make an appointment with them and ask these types of questions. And yes, you can also send an email as well. Things like, for CS, you spoke about how competitive it is. Well, even if I'm admitted, well, how difficult is it to get a seat in the class, as an example,
Yeah.
So those types of questions. And also, I encourage them to try to speak to a current student if possible within their intended major at the institution.
You know, as a dean of an engineering school yourself,
Mhm.
in addition to you, I don't know how you do everything you do, but in addition to your private IEC practice, is you think about the students who are successful in your engineering school, and you guys don't have an AI major at this time. How would you advise if you were talking to a 17-year-old? How would you advise them in deciding whether this could be a good fit major for them? How to decide between maybe CS or data science or AI. Like, do you have advice? And
Mhm.
maybe this could help fuel a conversation around the dinner table or in the car with
Mhm.
families, which I think, getting that alignment and having conversations is so important.
Yeah. Before I answer your question, I'd love to
Yeah.
just say to your listeners that yes, I have two hats. One is that I college counselor at my business, Lantern College Counseling, and the other is that I'm a dean of academic advising and undergraduate studies for the School of Engineering at Tufts University. And I have formal conflict of interest agreement in place with Tufts that enables me to
Yeah.
do both roles. And today I'm here in my capacity as a representative of Lantern as an IEC.
That's right.
However, I'm happy to share insights about, and another note is I have no role with the Board of Admissions at Tufts
Yeah,
whatsoever.
no, yeah. Don't reach
Yeah.
out to her and think that you're getting into
No,
Tufts because you talked to or worked with Jennifer.
no.
It doesn't work that way,
No,
my
no,
friend.
big high walls between the two
Yes.
roles. However, of course, I have insights on this question
Yeah.
as a 30-year veteran, not 30 years old, a 30-year veteran in the field, guiding students to sort out their academic interests as they relate to potential majors and maybe minors as well. I always anchor on to, I'm an academic, I have a PhD in engineering. I
Yeah.
always anchor on to the courses that they'll be taking. And so, for instance, in my role at Tufts, we have what are called the degree sheets, which are maps, roadmaps for the degrees. And many other institutions have a set of degree requirements, suggested plan of study as
Pretty easy to find, honestly, on
right.
most schools' websites. Dig around, families. This is good information for you.
Right. And students should be looking at those potential pathways to see, do I really want to be doing all this stuff at the institution?
Right.
And, just to give you a sense of what a student would be studying if they were to study AI. And I mentioned already technology, math, logic, large amounts of data algorithms, but specific courses that they would be taking for AI
Yeah.
include foundational math courses, so things like Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, differential equations, maybe not differential equations, but maybe yes, probability and statistics for sure, linear algebra likely, discrete math likely. Those are things that if the student's hearing these courses and thinking, then that's probably not a good fit. But those things are also common to CS, what I just said. Foundational computing concepts, things like algorithm design, obviously introduction to programming and advanced programming like data structure, programming languages. Again, those things you're seeing now the overlap between CS and AI. Advanced computing concepts is where you might see AI and CS diverge, a CS degree in AI diverge. These are usually elective courses that students can opt to, choose.
Hmm.
And so you could actually get a pretty strong AI like CS degree by being strategic about choosing your upper level courses. In terms of AI like electives, these would be things like robotics or machine learning or big data processing, data
Yeah.
visualization, optimization control, decision making, vision, perception, and language processing. That's a big one,
Yeah.
right? All that we're hearing with the, as an example, ChatGPT, the large language models. And then on top of those are related electives. And this is where a student should really think about, do these things align with their values and their interests? Things like ethics, social responsibility, cognitive science, linguistics, psychology, philosophy. We mentioned Purdue's program earlier. AI programs can be more or have more or less of that, depending on,
Right.
as you mentioned earlier, where they sit and their flavor, the way in which they were developed and the goals. And so students really need to look at, do I want to study these things? So I go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah. Well, no, as you were saying this, I'm like, it actually reminds me of a conversation I had with somebody who worked at a university and would help students with transfers. And she would say like a lot of times kids would land in her office and they ultimately didn't end up transferring. They were in a good fit. They were maybe having difficulty with a course, right? And they were ready to like jump ship.
Hmm.
And but looking through, she said sometimes kids would come in, oh, I want to switch into business. And the student and with her, they'd look at it together and they would say, like, you're not going to make it through calculus. And you have to have calculus to get that degree. So, what other degrees can we get that maybe don't
Yeah.
involve that level of math that can get you to that career? Because the reality is, as a career advisor, I know that there are a handful of jobs that the name of the major sounds exactly like the name,
Right.
you know, education, nursing, engineering, I mean, architecture, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so you've got to have a particular degree. But there are a lot of different pathways in which I think it's really cool that these AI majors are coming up, but it's also good for us to say like look at what you would be taking, look at adjacent fields that can
Yep.
get you to the career because the way we work at it is let's begin with the end in mind. So, like, if you really don't just want to use AI in your job, but you want to be on the cutting edge of AI development and tools and things like that, okay, reverse engineer
Hmm.
career back to majors that lead there and then find the institutions,
Right.
but they don't have to have the AI, the degree. But I love that this is emerging. You know, as
Hmm.
you think about this, and we were talking earlier about you and I suspect that it's probably easier to get into an AI program than a computer science right now. What types of like for your students that you're working with through your IEC practice, what types of real world experiences, that's something we stress as we support our students in gaining real world experiences so they can make decisions about if a career path actually fits instead of just reading about it on paper or online.
Hmm. Hmm.
Probably not
Hmm.
on paper, probably
Hmm.
online.
Yeah.
Do you have suggested real world experiences that they can do to, I know we've got some that we suggest in this area. What's your advice that you give to a teenager?
Well, you're reminding me of a student that I spoke with yesterday. He's one of my high school students I'm working with, helping apply to college, and he's a sophomore. And I work with my students in the sophomore year. I call it their passion discovery workbook, but it's a set of questions that help drive at what makes you excited, what makes you,
Yeah.
when did you last feel alive, what sparks you, your curiosity. And he believes he wants to study CS, and so many of his answers were data driven. We're data driven. And
Mhm.
he had done a lot of hackathons that he loves, that they make him feel alive. So a student has to like coding, has to like math, but also data. One of his favorite projects was for, I think it was his psychology class, AP Psych. And he did a project on, let me see if I'm going to get this straight, brain rot terms for his peers. And he did like a survey of like 53 brain rot terms that he gave to his whole graduate class, not
Yeah.
graduating class, and compiled, to gain insights into sort of the, the some sociological aspects of
Right.
his peers. And he had a lot of fun visualizing the data and making the data come to life for other people. And, he spoke about how a number of different things that made him excited were really based in data. And for me, I said to him, I think AI is a field you might want to think about. If a student enjoys coding, and if they don't know, they should do some.
That's
and if
right. Get those
and
real world experiences,
Right.
right?
And also managing data we began at the start of the session talking about, yes, there's math, yes, there's coding, but there's also data. That's the fundamental distinction, right, for AI is that we're now at a point, I mentioned this a few times, where we can actually wrap our, I don't want to say brains, because machines around this vast amount of data in a way that we never could 30 years ago. And so data is an underpinning to AI, and students have to have some awareness about that.
Well, it's, when we give students the Berkman personality assessment, we measured 10 areas that they can be motivated around work in. One of them is called numerical. And sometimes students get surprised. We devote module 1 of our course to really doing a deep dive and understanding your personal wiring. And I'll have some students sometimes that go like, I'm so surprised that numerical is really high for me.
Mhm.
And we have a conversation around that during our Q&A time, or if they're working with one of our coaches, and they go, and what we do is we separate out, there's solving math problems and there's understanding data, and
Mhm.
they're very closely related. But I've met, we've coached over 4,000 students, and I've met a lot of those students who the way they answer their assessment ranks their numerical motivation high. But when we really dig deeper and have a great conversation about it, it's not about solving math problems. It's not about calculus. It's not about complex. It's not about differential equations. It is about the underpinnings of data
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
what that means. And I think everybody, every listener who's STEM focused, to really pause and think about the difference between those two concepts. We've been doing it for years and years and years with how we advise. And I think it so relates to what you just said.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's absolutely true. And that's what I saw with this student. And
Yeah,
the other
it's a
thing I
great
saw with
example of
this
that.
student, and I don't know if, you may have different insights on this that I'm going to offer right now, but he talked about one of the things that was most fun for him was that he applied for a competitive math program, Promise, which is out at BU PROMYS, that a number of my students have done. And he had to solve the problems, and that was the most fun because he said they were really hard and I had to really think about them for a long time. And I never need to think in math in school because I'm just turning a crank. And
Yeah.
so identifying, like, are you just good at math and school? Do you enjoy it, or do you enjoy just being good at it versus you love solving problems and you love kind of wrapping your brain around and being comfortable with an unknown and, an unclear path forward? These are all things that I think, well, are positives for any student, but
Yeah.
especially if you want to go into a technical field, which is in many cases very rigorous, there has to be a real basis for that, not just,
Yeah.
well, I want a job, or I'm good at crunching numbers and I'm good at doing school math.
I am looking. I always have all my screens open. We on episode 172, I had Ben Orlin on, and we talked about building math confidence. And one of the things I talked about when we were having this conversation is, we look at what does numerical motivation look like? Is it data or is it math? But I said to him, I'm like, math is one of the most switched out of majors, as is CS is as well. And we've got kids who overestimate their math prowess. And we've got a lot of kids that underestimate what level of math prowess it takes to do a lot of different careers. Like a lot of careers from a career coaching standpoint, I'm like, if you did okay in algebra 2, you're completely going to be fine. But this higher level, and there's not a lot of kids in between.
There's probably also a part, this is a little of a sidestep, but there's also a
Yeah.
part that I see, which students go into these fields for the wrong reasons,
Mm-hmm.
because they want a job, or they want, maybe they're unaware, you're doing a lot
Yeah.
to increase awareness. But certainly when with my dean hat on, I'm working with students, particularly if they come from a background where they haven't been exposed to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different careers, they just know a few, and they, hook onto this, and it may not be grounded in a reality. And so that's why, a lot of the work you're doing is so important, because if we can find that earlier, they can figure that out earlier, then they'd be more likely to find their correct path, if not
Right,
correct,
and not
a
make
good
that
path.
mistake, right? Because then if we've entered something that doesn't really fit, now we have to switch. You'll
And
have to
it's
switch
sometimes not a
majors.
very positive experience.
That's
Trust
right.
me, I work with a lot of students,
You're seeing it firsthand.
yes. Yeah.
You know, the student that you said, and we can wrap up kind of with this, but the student that said, I get into my math classes and it's just so easy for me. And it's just,
Hmm.
it's just machine and boom,
Right.
boom, boom. Got it. And he loves doing the contest. On episode 149, I just pulled this one up as well. Boosting STEM student success through math contests. Even if a student doesn't necessarily want to go out or feels like, I could see kids saying like, I don't have the time to do math contests. Okay, that's fine. But in that episode, Vita John
Mhm.
gave us some practice sites where students could go to prepare for these math contests.
Mhm.
That would be a great way to just test like, am I ready? Am I excited to solve harder problems?
Yeah.
Because the school math comes so easily to me.
Yeah. That's a great idea. And just to clarify, he wasn't doing a math contest. He was applying to a competitive math
Oh, sorry.
summer
Okay.
program, but that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same
It's
idea
in the
that
same vein.
he
Yeah.
had the experience of, grappling with problems that were very different from what he had seen before and open-ended. And he said, they took a lot of time, and he loved it. And that's the important piece, I think, right? Is that he learned
Yeah.
that he loved that. Yeah.
With that Ben Orlin episode, he referenced somebody who solved a mathematician for career wise, solved one math problem in his entire life.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
can you handle working for decades and not be so deflated and defeated
Hmm.
by that? Like,
Yeah.
that would be a clue. Well, this has been
Yeah.
so much. You're always a great conversationalist. You've
Oh,
got so
as are
much to
you.
offer on these topics. So, Jennifer, if anybody who's listening wants to learn more about working with you in your IEC practice,
Hmm.
which does not help you get into Tufts once
That's
again,
right. Thank
how,
you.
yes, how can they find you?
They can find me at my website, which is www.lanterncollegecounseling, all one word, .com. They can also email me at jennifer@lanterncollege.com. Again, Lantern College, all one word. And as you noted, the conversation we had today is based on an article that I've written that's on my website. It's called Best Colleges for Artificial Intelligence, AI
We're going to
Majors.
put all of this in the show
Yeah.
notes.
So people can go to my blog and find that there.
And when the people are driving down the road, we do not want you to try to write these things down. So go over to the show notes. We've got lots of free resources for you there. So, Jennifer, it was a pleasure. I can't wait till next time. Thank you for all your insights.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. I always enjoy our conversations as well.